This episode contains explicit and adult content. Listener discretion is advised. All cases and stories covered by this podcast are true stories involving real people. The opinions of the host and any interviewees are simply that, opinions. The credibility of any witnesses and what they say is to be determined by the listener. Everyone is presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law.
Even if she did pick up and leave, she was always active on Facebook or on social media.
And you had mentioned, whenever she goes away, she's vocal about it. Like, she says, I'm going here.
Very vocal, as you could see. To assume she ran away. That's the easy way out, in my opinion. Based on the circumstances, that's not the intent of somebody or the motive of somebody looking to disappear. And anyone who thinks otherwise either wanted her to disappear or who just doesn't really give a fuck. Excuse my language.
It had been a few days since 28-year-old Monica Chisar had returned home from an overseas trip to Portugal. Now back in Canada and once again working, a friend drove her partway back to the apartment where she was staying after work. That friend dropped her off at an empty parking lot of the beer store just about 100 to 200 meters from the apartment building, shortly after midnight on Wednesday, July 11th, 2018. This is the last time anyone reported seeing or hearing Monica. In the year and a half since her disappearance, there has been no sight of Monica and no online activity. This is episode 13, The Bohemian, Monica Chisar's story, and this is your host, Genevieve Germain. Just a few items about this podcast. True Crime Real Time is a bi-weekly podcast covering missing persons and unsolved murders. We're available across many platforms such as Castbox, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, and many others. Links, information, and pictures relating to the cases or stories we cover can be found on our website at www.truecrimerealtimepod.com or on our Instagram account or on our Facebook page. The links to Instagram, our website, and our Facebook page can be found on the podcast channel description. Photos, as well as any other information, are generally posted at the same time as when the episode is published. Now back to the show. Hamilton is the third largest city in Ontario, Canada, with a current population of 750,000. It's approximately 40 to 50 miles, or 60 to 80 kilometers west of Toronto, and approximately 66 kilometers, that's 41 miles, west of Niagara Falls. The city of Hamilton wraps around the most western part of Lake Ontario. Hamilton is known for its industrial plants such as coal, steel, and petroleum products, as well as its foray into nuclear research. Additionally, it's known for its heavy presence of the Mafia and Hells Angels. Despite this, Hamilton is very multicultural, with 25% of the population having emigrated from different countries. And despite its large industrial plants that dot the city and sometimes create obnoxious smells that waft in the air, the city itself is dotted by many conservation areas and waterfalls. Monica had moved to Hamilton in and around 2015 from Toronto. She was often described as carefree and had a troubled life. For this story, we spoke to Monica's cousin to learn a little more about Monica's life and habits.
So, Monica and I have, I guess you could say, a mutual family member who's her brother and my cousin. Monica's mom, they share a mother, and his father's my uncle. Monica was taken away from her mom very young, being due to physical abuse, like very bad physical abuse. So she was put into a group home, and I personally did not even meet Monica until I was in middle school, which was like grade 7. And then once I met her, I introduced her to her brother, who's also my cousin.
So she never even met that brother until she was quite a bit older.
Exactly.
So what's the age difference between you and Monica, or are you the same age?
I'm 26. Monica would be approximately around 30.
You had mentioned before that she has 4 siblings that we know of, or that she knows of.
Okay, so there's one. His name is Ashley, which is the one that I'm related to as well. He was born addicted to drugs and fetal alcohol syndrome. However, he was very lucky that he was taken away at birth, so he didn't have to experience the physical abuse. So there's Ashley, that's the first brother, who's schizophrenic, and partially, like most of the time, homeless. Then there's Felix, who he has actual mental disabilities, which actually impairs the way he lives day to day. And he was also taken away right at birth. And his grandmother or great-grandmother actually took care of him. And now she's dead. And he lives with his father's wife. Randomly, one day I was just on Facebook, like I normally am, and I see a post from her sister saying, if you've seen my sister, please let me know, so on and so forth. So I messaged her, and I was just like, sorry. I'm like, hey girl, sorry to bother you, but I wanted to see if there's anything I can do and search for Monica as I noticed your post. And she said, hey, just get a reach of as many people as you can to get the word out. I'm trying to get more information from her mom's side of the family that I don't know too well. I know you know them, so if you could reach out to them, I would appreciate it. So whatever, so I told her that I would, and then I asked her straight up, I'm like, hey, by the way, did you just find out she was missing? Because I'm just trying to understand how this is only coming up now if she's been missing since July. So basically, she told me that she was on vacation when she first went missing, and when she got back, she assumed Monica was ignoring her because she took stuff from their father. So she waited and looked for her, but then after she noticed that she wasn't active on Facebook, that she went and reported it 5 to 6 weeks after she was missing. And then she told me how the cops told her that adults have the right to go missing, and that due to that fact is very complicated. And I told her, I'm like, yeah, they have a right to go missing for 48 hours. It doesn't matter whether they have the right to go missing. It's a 48-hour rule. Just like, I was like, frankly, I'm like, the fact that you waited 3 months to report her missing is probably very suspicious.
And she didn't mention anything about what Monica took from her dad?
No. Basically, the last thing she said referencing that is she stole from the family and disappeared, which she had done in the past. The only reason I got worried was because of no activity on Facebook, because the rest she's done before. And then I asked her, I was just like, well, in the eyes of the law, why wasn't it reported as a theft then? I'm like, babe, no offense, if I was a cop, none of this would make sense to me. I get what you're saying, but to a cop, it does not add up. And then she said that, and then that's what she said, because her dad didn't want to get her in trouble.
And her family lives in Toronto?
Yeah.
Okay. And you had mentioned she lived in Hamilton for about 3 years?
Yeah.
So when I looked at Monica's Facebook, because she has more than one profile, on one of them I could see that the last activity was when she was just coming back from Portugal on the last thing was July 8th, 2018.
Exactly.
You had said she was on the 11th, she was coming home from work. Somebody was driving her home from her work, and she was scheduled to work the next day?
That was the last time she was seen. Talking to the lead investigator, and yeah, the last time I talked to him was December 2018.
Because we were talking a little bit about this whole situation with her allegedly stealing something from her dad, which, under your impression, it does seem like something that she would do, but it doesn't seem like she would just, out of everything that's happened in her life, it just didn't seem like something that she would just pick up and leave for.
No, and regardless, like her sister said, she was, even if she did pick up and leave, she was always active on Facebook or on social media. So, like, in my opinion, I don't understand how you could see 4 months of inactiveness on social media and not report it. Like, I didn't know that about her at the time. You know what I mean?
Would it be possible, or would it be something that she would do because she has traveled quite a bit, would it be something that she would do, just get on a plane and kind of head out to Mexico because that's where her son is?
No, because she's been fighting to try and get him back here.
And you had mentioned whenever she goes away, she's vocal about it.
Very vocal, as you could see.
I wanted to hear from you again what your theories are with regards to anybody kind of saying, well, she could have just picked up and left and started new somewhere else.
That they're lying, or that they're literally so oblivious or non-logical to the fact that, based on the circumstances, Monica being driven back to her home with a scheduled shift the next day, that's not the intent of somebody or the motive of somebody looking to disappear. And anyone who thinks otherwise either wanted her to disappear or who just doesn't really give a fuck. Excuse my language. That's the easy way out, in my opinion, just to assume she ran away. Like, where's she going to go at 1 o'clock in the morning? Like, what flight is she even going to catch at 1 o'clock in the morning with no suitcases on her way home from work? There was no circumstance of her even being able to logically run away. And she just got back to Toronto from Portugal. Her ass could have stayed there. She's done it before, like they said. So why even bother coming back, and not even just coming back, going to work and making your presence known? Nothing adds up to me.
Monica had just returned from vacation and seemingly working. After working the evening of July 10th, she had a friend drive her close to the buildings where she was staying, although for some reason not directly to the building. According to the person who gave Monica a drive, they dropped her off at the corner of Barton Street and Parkdale Avenue in the empty parking lot of a beer store. There are many apartment buildings nearby, and allegedly she was staying at one of those on Melvin Street, which is only 100 to 200 meters away. I visited this site after dark to see the location and lighting situation. Here are the results. Okay, I'm on location. I'm at the beer store at the corner of Barton Street East and Parkdale Avenue in Hamilton. This is closer to the big industrial corporations or plants, I guess you could say. So there's a slight smell in the air, although it's not as strong as it would be closer to those plants. Like a bit like sulfur, or if you've ever smelled a paper processing plant, that's the kind of smell that's in the air. And I would imagine that's like that at any time. Now, I've arrived here because it is getting close to winter time. It's dark here already. So when Monica was dropped off at this location, it was just past midnight, so it would have been dark. There probably would have been a lot less traffic, but the lighting would have been close to the same, with the exception that this particular beer store closes at 10 p.m. So this would have been closed when she got here, so the light from the inside of the building would not have been illuminating, I don't think. Behind this building, on different streets than Barton, but just kind of that are abutting or adjoining to Barton, are a couple of apartment buildings. And it's in one of these apartment buildings where Monica was staying. Now, I've taken a photograph of that, and you can see one of the buildings behind this beer store from ground level. I'm unsure why somebody would drop her off at this parking lot and not just drive a couple of 100 meters and not just drop her off at an apartment, especially at the building, I should say, especially since if she got here, the only reasonable explanation I could think of is if she got here and she wanted to purchase something at the store prior to going home, and she said, just drop me off here because I want to buy something at the store before going home. That being said, the store was closed, so I'm not sure why somebody would drop her off here instead of just driving her a little bit further to where she was going. You would think that this intersection would be a little bit more illuminated than it actually is, considering that this is a larger populated area. Hamilton's not a small city, it's a decent sized city, and this seems like it's a very busy intersection, although I'm sure after midnight it would be a little bit less so. But just across the street from the beer store is the Hyundai dealership. Now, they have a ton of lamp posts, but I believe they're all illuminated, but the lights or the lamp posts are facing into the dealership's parking lot and not facing out. So they have almost like a cover on one end, and it's just facing directly into the parking lot. So everywhere where the vehicles are parked is where it's illuminated, but that light doesn't necessarily come over to this area. In the beer store parking lot itself, there are no lampposts. The lampposts that are around here are just on the street, so whatever light's coming from there is going to come on the street, or is going to come into the parking lot. There is some light coming from the beer store itself, but as I mentioned before, if the beer store was closed, I'm not sure what the lighting situation would be for the store itself. I don't imagine much illumination, not as much as we're having now, would be present at around midnight. To be honest, I thought this would be a lot more lit than it is. There is definitely a potential for somebody to be hiding out in a corner. I guess the question is, why would somebody drop her off here and not just go a little bit further to drop her off at home? And I think that's probably going to be an important question leading up to what happened to her, and unfortunately I don't know that we'll find the answer to that. The case is still open, and obviously I believe the police are doing what they can do to move the case forward. Just also taking a look at just the type of people, or kind of the atmosphere, I guess I should say, of the area. One of the reasons why I go to these different locations is to get a really good sense of the community and the vibe that the place gives, that kind of get a good understanding of what the environment was like for the victim of the stories that we cover. I didn't feel as unsafe as I have felt in some of the locations that I've visited to date. These seem to be just people that live in this area. There are apartment buildings, there are homes. It's not too bad, actually. I've seen worse. The cars that are coming here, they're not run down. The people are clean. I don't see any people begging for anything anywhere, which some of the locations that I go to, you get that. This is not like a well-to-do area, but it's just a regular, everyday type of area, I'm going to be honest. Some of the people frequenting here, they're older. I have not seen any youths, or a lot of people are either workers that are just coming off of work from one of the plants that's close by, or construction workers, just a variety of people. Like I said, I haven't gotten the same vibe as I've gotten in some of the areas that I've visited. So I could see that maybe if I was walking in this area, I might feel a little bit safe. I don't think that I necessarily feel uneasy. I haven't felt uneasy, I should say, since I've been here. Again, I don't know what it's like at midnight, or if some other types of people come out, but listen, there's no huge bars or clubs that I've seen around here. The store closes at 10. I mean, nobody's going to the dealership at that time either. And other than that, there's like some bungalows around. It's bungalows and apartment buildings. Really. A nail salon. So, I don't know. For somebody that's unknown to Monica, that's just waiting here for an opportunity, seems unlikely. It just seems like an unlikely scenario. What seems likely is that somebody who knew Monica, somebody who knows her, is probably likely involved. And it just seems like that. Again, this is my opinion, and it should only be taken as an opinion,
People come and go to this parking lot. I mean, the store's open. I don't see any reason why anybody would be here. What I need to find out is if this parking lot is used for any other scenario at nighttime. I don't see what there would be, but maybe I'll try to ask around. I don't know. It just seems unlikely. I still can't get over the fact that somebody would just drop her off here and not just a little bit further, unless something was happening in this parking lot that she needed to be in here for some reason. The only thing that I can think of was that the beer store was open, but the signs say that it closed at 10. And the second thing that I could think of is if somebody regularly met here at specific times to sell narcotics of some kind. But again, maybe that's a question we can have with the case manager when he's back to see when they did track her up till that date, what the reason was for the person who dropped her off. I guess it's just very odd.
Very little is known in Monica's case, and vital clues as to what happened were missed due to the delay in reporting her missing. Here's what we do know. Monica was working and was usually very active on social media. Her last post on Facebook was on July 8, 2018, of a beach. She was leaving or had just left Portugal. Between July 8th and July 10th, 2018, Monica had taken or stolen something from her father, causing a slight rift. Monica worked on July 10th, which was a Tuesday, until late, and was being driven back home after work. However, was dropped off 100 to 200 meters from the apartment building. Either Monica wanted to be in that parking lot for a particular reason, or she wasn't keen on the person who gave her the ride knowing where she was staying, or didn't want whoever was at the building seeing her with that particular individual. It is unknown if she made it to the apartment. That being said, no one has publicly come forward to say Monica was staying with them, and they didn't report her missing. And as of March of this year, they were still not known to the police. It is unknown where she was working or what she was doing for work, but her cousin did say she was scheduled to work the next day. However, if this was the case, no one reported her missing or conducted a wellness check after not showing up for work. This is what Detective Dave Aliniak from the Major Crime Unit of the Hamilton Police Services had to say at a press conference in March 2019 about Monica's lifestyle.
Monica had somewhat of an unconventional lifestyle, like a Bohemian lifestyle, rather not transient, but she would be fairly carefree. She would go on extended trips and stay with friends, and was in and out of touch with family over the years. It was acknowledged that she did have a drug problem, or does have a drug problem. In the past, she had disappeared for periods of time and would call from other places, other countries, and touch base with family, and these would be just random occurrences. When she first went missing, family just thought that this was just another one of those occurrences. However, after a period of time, in September, they reported her missing because there had been no activity on social media. Even though she had changed locations often, she had usually maintained an active profile in social media, and this was absent this time. As well, there was no, from her friends and family at the time, there was no indication at all that she was planning to go on some kind of trip. Having said what I did before, there had usually been some kind of indicators that, she was going to change towns or go on a trip or something like that. She would have made a remark to somebody, and that was absent this time as well. She had worked as an exotic dancer. She had worked as an escort in the past. She did have a drug problem. All of this is acknowledged. It's unfortunate, but it is acknowledged that she had lived in that world. But there was no indication that she was engaging in those behaviors at the time, other than her status with her drug addiction.
It is believed that more than one individual was in the car when Monica was dropped off at Barton Parkdale. Law enforcement indicated that Monica was in debt or owed someone money, but wouldn't go into further details on the matter. Eventually, after close to 3 months with no social media activity, Monica was reported missing, and in March of 2019, the case was handed over to the Major Crime Unit of the Hamilton Police. They indicated they had reason to believe that foul play was involved in her disappearance. This brings us to the end of part 1 of Monica's story. As always, if you have any tips or information that you wish to provide, please contact the Hamilton Police. Their phone number and contact information will be in the show description notes. If you have additional information and you'd like to speak with me directly with regards to our next episode featuring Monica's story, feel free to reach out to me directly. My email address is truecrimerealtimepod@gmail.com. That's truecrimerealtimepod@gmail.com. This brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope that you'll join us in 2 weeks' time as we delve further into Monica's story. In the meantime, here's a recommended podcast.
This is Brew Crime, a craft beer and true crime podcast.
I'm Mike.
I'm Beck.
And I'm Nina.
And we're your hosts.
We pair a true crime story with a craft beer.
That Nina will probably hate.
Yeah, probably.
Whatever. You can find our show on all your favorite podcast apps, and if you can't find it, contact us and we'll try and change that.
We can be found at brewcrime.com or on Twitter at brewcrime, on Facebook at brewcrime, or if you want to go to our group, it's group/brewcrime on Facebook, or on Instagram at Pacific Beer Chat.
Join us as we discuss the horrible crimes that surround us and try not to giggle.
If you have questions, comments, or case suggestions, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at truecrimerealtimepod@gmail.com or complete the case submission form on our website. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of True Crime Real Time. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a good rating and leave us a review. This will help our reach and bring more attention to the cases we cover.